We are also going to start vaccinating children.
Vaccination of children, it will only be undertaken if parents accept their children to be vaccinated.
Jonah got vaccinated at school.
Samanya kontino omwana wange bagenda kumugema. Bwe bamukuba empiso, Jonah yatandikira wencha okuzimba.
I went to Chirudu Hospital and interviewed Jonah on his deathbed.
I
was trying to get the first-hand information.
Omwana n'atabuka n'atandika okusesema omusaayi.
Just wondering, what's killing Jonah?
Angamba ekibumba kya Jonah kyafa, ensigo zaafa.
So we got to know about the details of the vaccination and the uptake 2 weeks after.
For even simple things such as doing a blood test, consent is required.
Jonathan died.
Investigating journalist.
Killing Jonah.
My name is Daniel Lutaya. I'm an investigative journalist with News 24/7. For the past 7 months, I've been following a story of a 14-year-old boy called Jonathan who died after being vaccinated against COVID-19. Jonathan was vaccinated against his parents' will. His parents did not know that their child had been vaccinated.
I was started in February. Jonah got vaccinated. In a way that we are not informed or we are not asked for approval prior to the vaccination. We got to know about it when a friend of his called Mom, telling him that Jonah wasn't well since the day they got vaccination. The name of the school is called St. Martin. It's in St. Martin Secondary School, located in PG, Jaja.
The family says, health workers came and vaccinated everybody at the school without informing their parents.
Nafuna okutegeezebwa nga Maria Kabayisanza mwana omu ku baana bange babadde ku ssomero lya St. Martin. Yantegeeza, yakozesa essimu ya Metro n'antegeeza n'angamba abadde amaze wiiki emu n'ennaku 4 nga talaba Jonah mu kilaasi kuba bonna basoma senior 2. Ye n'alowooza nti oba muganda we baamugoba. N'agezaako okubuuza babadde bakwano ba Jonah. Abakwano ba Jonah ne bamutegeeza nti Jonah yagemebwa n'ayisibwa bubi era abeera mu ddoomu.
If a child is to do any medical procedures, there has to be consent from their parents, and that is according to the law.
Now, if you look at the Vaccination Act of 2017, it looked at vaccination largely of young children between 1 day and 5 days. And 5 years. And what it provided was that a parent would take a child for vaccination. That was the standard practice under the Act. Now, if you notice clearly that before COVID, a lot of vaccinations, polio, measles, were done for children under 5 years. And so the standard practice was that a parent must take the child for vaccination. And by taking a child, the implication is that the parent has consented to a child to be vaccinated. Now, with the onset of COVID, the situation has substantially changed, and you have children beyond 5 years getting vaccinated across the world. Now, the question is, how do you handle the question of consent? In medical practice, for even simple things such as doing a blood test, consent is required. And it goes into complicated things like organ transplant. Consent is required. And this is based on the fact that human beings have a right of bodily autonomy to know what exactly they do with their bodies. But now, in the case of Uganda, you will notice that our age of maturity is 18 years. That is the legal age upon which a child or a person can take full responsibility for their decisions. Now, there is confusion where, for example, you have a child in custody of a school, or where you have a child in custody of a cultural or religious institution outside the confines of the home, where they are not with their parents. The law is clear that by the mere fact that you're having a child in your custody does not give you the mandate to consent on behalf of the child. You can allow vaccinators to come within your institutions to conduct vaccinations, but it does not take away parental obligation to give consent. Okay? So, because you're taking care of the child does not mean you have the right to consent on behalf of the child. That mandate still rests on the parent of the child.
The vaccination of children 5 to 17 years will only, and only, I repeat, will only be undertaken if parents accept their children to be vaccinated. So we are still having discussions with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Local Government, the Cabinet of Uganda, and the parents in regards to this. And if the parents so decide that they want their children vaccinated, this will be done during the holiday season, and parents will be requested to willingly take their children. There is no force, it is completely voluntary.
So we called the deputy, and he told us that Jonah is okay. So we let it go. Then after a few days, he called us and told us that Jonah wasn't well, and he needed to be taken home for further medication.
I can tell you, and you're going to see the videos, it was harder for the family to bury that boy at 14.
Now, COVID deputy, Mr. Mirimira, nsooka mwetondera omukubira ekiro ssaawa 4 kuba nali sikikolangako. Ne mubuuza abaana bange ababiri, Maria ne Jonah. Mr. Mirimira n'angamba nti abaana abo mama Jonah gye bali bulungi. Bwe nzijukira obulungi namukubira lunaku lwakuna, kuba yantegeeza nti n'olwokubiri yabaddeko mu compound ne Jonah, nga Jonah ali stubborn nga bw'abeera kuba abadde alina eddalu. Kati nze natwala ebigambo bya Mr. Mulimira deputy kuba muntu mukulu. Kati bwe mmala omukubira essimu wayita wiiki emu, nankubira zaali ssaawa 4 ez'okumakya, n'angamba mama Jonah mbadde nsaba ojja ku ssomero kimu omwana. Ne mubuuza ndi, n'angamba Jonah. Ne mubuuza yabadde ki, n'angamba Jonah mulwadde. Ne mubuuza bwe nakubira essimu n'agamba ntya, n'angamba mama Jonah va ku biri, Jonah yalwadde olunaku lw'eggulo. Ne mugamba Jonah munteere ku taxi, ansiŋŋaane ku paaka ansasule taxi. Nantegeeza nti Jonah tasobola kutambula yekka.
And remember, he was vaccinated in February, so we got to know about the details of the vaccination and the after effects, I think like 2 weeks after. On reaching town, Jonah wasn't in a very good condition because he was a bit swollen. The whole body from the feet to the face, it was swollen. We had to go to Chitevi.
Bansiŋŋaana mu kkubo nga mbalinze. Omwana ne mukwata ne mutwala mu Kisenyi ku ddwaliro lya City Council. Ddwaliro lya City Council ne bantegeeza nti tebagenda musobola okuggyako kabamuggyekoko akasaayi bakebere oba alina infection n'ensigo. Ne babimuggyako ne bansaba okweyongerayo mu ddwaliro eddala. Ku olwo lwennyini nagenda Ekitebi. Omwana ne bamukebera ne basanga nabo ng'ensigo z'omwana zaayonooneka. ne basanga nga aweddemu omusaayi ne basanga nga alina infection.
So on reaching Kitebi, there are some tests that were supposed to be done, which we did. We discovered that Jonah now had a problem with the kidney, one of the kidneys. And so that's why he was swollen and everything.
Ne bajjanjaba Jonah bamujjanjabira ennaku 5 naye nga tetuli ku kitanda. Jonah yafuna obujjanjabi e Kitebi era n'azimbulukuka kuba yali yazimba yenna. Mwezi ennaku 5 Jonah yazimbulukuka naye n'asigala nga feesi yokka yekyazimbe. Jonah yafuna obuweerero butono ddala. Olunaku lwe twamalayo treatment y'e Kitebi, ssaawa 6 ez'ekiro omwana n'atabuka n'atandika okusesema omusaayi nga mungi. Ne nkubira mutabani wange nsubuga n'ajja ne tuteeka omwana mu mmotoka naye ng'asesema omusaayi mungi nga n'embeera gy'alimu si yakutegeera. Ne tugenda e Kiruddu. Bwe twatuuka e Kiruddu, embeera y'ekiruddu tetwasooka gitegeera nti tugenze budde bwa kiro. Twalwawo okufuna omusawo atufaako ng'omwana aziyidde tassa bulungi. Ne tukola okupapa olw'embeera y'omwana gye yalimu, ne tumugyawo ne tumuzza mu mmotoka ne tumutwala e Lubaga.
I had to go and pick them and drive them to Lubaga Hospital.
Bamuteekako omusaayi ne bamujjanjaba ffe bye tutamanyi. Obudde bwe bwakya ssaawa 5 ez'okumakya ne batugamba tugende ku ddirisa tukole yalinge kabbiiru, omwana tebamusobola. Dokita n'atugamba ku malwaliro 2 tulondewo e Kiruddu oba Ensambya. Naye n'atugamba Ensambya kyetaagisa okuba nga tulina kaashi wa miliyoni 3 gwe tuteekawo mu kusooka. Sente zo tetwaziina ne tukkiriza ne batuwa ambulensi ne tutwala e Kiruddu. Bwe twatuuka e Kiruddu baatufaako, baatufiirako ddala. Twalina abasawo bangi n'obujjanjabi bungi. Ku emergency twamalawo essaawa nga 5 ng'abasawo batufiirako ddala, naye embeera ya Jonah yagaana okudda emabega. Ne tulaba nga batukimye nga batugamba tugenda mu ICU. Nga nze maama Jonah nali simanyi ICU. Ne batutwala mu ICU ne tufuna obujjanjabi. Keya gye sirabangako wadde ne wansi baatufaako, naye keya ya ICU yasukka. Ne bafa ku mwana wange kuba yali ali bubi. Mwana wange ne bamujjanjaba.
He was admitted to ICU on that very day. So in ICU for almost a month, I think a month and a few days. He was responding, okay, some days he was okay, other days he was not responding well. But after some time, around 5 weeks or 6 weeks, he was then taken to the wards.
Nafunamu okunyigirizibwa naddala mu ssente kuba eddagala lyalinga lya ssente nnyingi. Ab'essomero saabakubira kuba nali ndaba kikakata ku bo nga abasindisa omwana nga n'embeera bagiraba. Njogera ntya Katonda ne sitamulimira yankubirako omulundi gumu era ne munnyonnyola nti Jonah ali mu mbeera mbi, tuli ku kitanda, teyaddamu kunkubira.
Personally went to school and I had a conversation with the headmaster face to face, of which he promised things that he didn't fulfill. To the fact that they didn't even come to hospital in the 5 months that we have been in hospital. They didn't come, not even a single phone call.
ICU twamalayo weeks 2 n'ennaku 4. Nze nali ngula eddagala, nze nali nkebeza omusaayi.
Jonathan's family, everybody around Jonathan at that moment was just wondering, what's killing Jonah?
Nategeezebwa abasawo badokita abaali bajjanjaba Jonah mu ICU. Ne bangamba nti omutima gwa Jonah gwanafuwa, omutima gwa Jonah gwazimba. Bangamba ekibumba kya Jonah kyafa, ensigo zaafa. Nga tukyali mu ICU, Jonah yatandika okusesema omusaayi omungi okusinga ku gwe yali asesema. Badokita ne bansaba tukole CT scan. Ne ngenda ne nsasula ne tukola CT scan. ne tusingana nga amawuggwe ga Jonah gaali gakutuka. Jonah we baamugemera yali alina emyaka 14 kuba Jonah waafiiridde alina emyaka 14 n'emyezi 5. Abasawo bansuubiza aba ICU nti Jonah akyali mwana muto akyayinza okuzimba amawuggwe. Bwe nzirako emabega omwana wange tagendangako ku kitanda. Jonah tateekebwangako mazzi, Jonah tateekebwangako kanula, takubwangako ku mpiso. Bye byasooka mu bulamu bwa Jonah okubaawo.
The only issue he had on his body was the eyes. So yeah, he needed to sit closer to the blackboard to see well. That's the only issue.
Jonah abadde ayogera n'abamawulire ge yayogerako nabo nga bwe baamukuba empiso ng'olwaleero Jonah yatandikirawo enkya okuzimba ate n'atafuna bujjanjabi. Ekyasinga okumpisa obubi ng'omwana agamba n'eddoosi waabwe ow'abalenzi yalinga ng'amusanga ku katanda ng'azimbye nga tasobola kuvaako n'amukubanga ebikonde mu mugongo ng'amugamba lwaki tosobola kwekubiriza n'ova ku kitanda n'ogenda mu kiraasi. Omwana ne yeekubiriza okuva mu ddoomu agenda afune obujjanjabi bamugoba nga bamugamba ddayo mu ddoomu toyagala kusoma tujja kuyita maama wakukube. Yagamba yakikola emirundi 3 nga bamujuliza maama.
I went to Chirudu Hospital one evening. Of course, cameras are not allowed inside the hospital, so I had to use my clandestine methods to sneak a secret camera into the hospital and interview Jonah on his deathbed. By the time I met Jonah, he was so small. He was so small. He could barely breathe. He was just holding on for dear life.
Nze bampita Daniel Lutaya.
Trying to ask him what exactly happened, and I was trying to get the first-hand information. I indeed got confirmation that he was vaccinated at school against COVID-19.
Bagema ku ssomero.
Bagema ki?
Banyume ya COVID.
After that vaccination, according to Jonathan's own account, because I spoke to him, and that it was after that vaccination that Jonathan's health started deteriorating until his family was called to pick him.
Ngandiko kuzimba. Ndwala. One bandeti waka. Okunkomyawo. Banye bandeta mu ddwaliro.
Obambi bakugema ani yakugema?
Waliwo abasaba bajja ku ssomero. Batugema.
Owulira otya mu mubiri?
Ntandika owulira obubi. Paka bandeta ewaka. Okujja mu ddwaliro.
I spoke to Jonah. He was in high spirits. I asked him if he was getting better, and he really said that he felt like he was getting better.
Owulira otya?
Siwulira bubi nnyo. Siwulira bubi nnyo.
Wabadde osoma mu class ki?
Olwo nsoma senior 2.
While I interviewed Jonah, he lost consciousness, and then we had to cut the interview.
Nkulaba oyina sapuliyo kiki ky'osinga okusabirako?
Jonah. He regained consciousness again and started talking to me. But you would tell that he was speaking with a lot of hardship. You would really tell that he was struggling to gasp for the breath to be able to speak to me. By the time I interviewed Jonathan, he was actively dying, really, because some of his organs had already started to shut down. He had to go through dialysis. He was, in what the doctors described, he was in a state of multiple organ failure. He still needed assistance to breathe properly, so he still had an oxygen tube in his nose. But according to his family, by the time I met Jonah for the first time to interview him at Chirudu Hospital in Machindye, he was far better off than how he had been when he was gotten out of school. Abakuddayo ku ssomero. Wali osoma ki? Wali bakubeera ki ng'okoze?
Investigating journalist.
So all this time when we've been doing this investigation, that statement that Jonathan made on his deathbed has kept ringing in my mind. And as an investigative journalist myself, I had to do this story for this 14-year-old investigative journalist who will never get to investigate anything at all because he lost his life. Even though Jonathan died, I had to do this for him because he wanted to be an investigative journalist himself. And I think this is the least that I can do for a fellow investigative journalist. This 14-year-old boy who could not, at that moment, by the time I found him, could not move himself out of bed, could not shower. He had to be showered by his family. He could not walk. He could not even change his clothes. He had to be changed. And I think the most saddening thing is that this family still believes they did not get justice. When the family reached out to me and told me that there was this story, I thought that it was very important for me to then go and try to get to the bottom of things. I spoke to Jonathan's mother when he was still alive, and she told me just how much they had spent. I also managed to get some receipts from Chirudu Hospital. It's very, it's a very difficult situation because this hospital is a government hospital and it's meant to be treating, the people in Uganda who cannot afford health insurance, the people who cannot afford to go to private hospitals.
Nakalubirizibwa nga tenjagala obulamu bw'omwana wange kuba mbadde maama mu bwenki nga nze ndi ku Jonah, so nga n'eddagala lya Jonah libadde lya bbeeyi. Jonah baamuteeka ku kyuma kya dialysis. Kyuma kya dialysis nali sikirabangako era nga sikimanyi, naye bwe baali bansibula mu ICU bankuutira ekyuma kitwalangako Jonah. Mpozi ne katheta, obuzibu bwe nasanga katheta gye nava nayo mu ICU yatuuka ekiseera neefuuka expired nga siina ssente, nga ssente zisookerwako eza katheta gibeera $55,000 oba $1,700,000 paka ku bukadde 3.5.
The bills were really alarming, I must say, for someone like me who was just from the outside looking inside and reporting this story. The bills that this family had to pay, I think, made it even more difficult for them. And I talked to them, and one of Jonathan's brothers, he was forced to, he was at one point, he told me he was giving up all his salary to try and treat Jonah. But all of this, the treatment was just simply not working. And Jonathan's health kept on deteriorating and going down.
Oluvannyuma lw'okubeera ku level 5 nakamalayo ennaku 4, dokita n'ajja n'akebera omwana n'ambuuza oba mmanyi ekimuluma, namugamba abasawo bakinnyonyola nti omutima gwa Jonah gwayonooneka, gwazimba ne gugaziwa, ekibumba kya Jonah kyafa wamu n'ensigo ze zaafiira ddala obutaddamu kutereera. Dokita yantegeeza nga nti maama Jonah, nkulaba ng'oli mukazi ate ng'oli wekka, mbadde nsaba ekyuma kya dialysis okyesonyiwe kubanga ne bwonna okikola omwana wo tagenda kuwona kusinziira ku buzibu omwana wo bwe yafuna, omwana wo waakufa. Nafunako abantu abajja ne bannambula nga baŋŋamba ba Ministry of Health, nga baŋŋamba badokita b'e Mulago, naye saafuna kuyambibwa konna.
Because the bill was so big, some members of the family had to come in to help. Saddening thing is that this was all at a government hospital. That's the most saddening thing about all of this. A government hospital that, bills that are in millions of shillings. And if you look at the statistics by the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, very few Ugandans can afford any medical care that goes above 1 million shillings. Now, we're talking about a family that had to spend millions of shillings in a government hospital. They felt that they had not received the necessary answers from the powers that be about what exactly killed Jonah. Because the family still alleges that it was that COVID-19 vaccination.
Wiki bbiri eziyise emabega lwe nayitibwa Dr. Kigundu n'angamba nti baagala okusindika empapula nzisayiningeko nzikirize Jonah atandika okugibwako samples zigende South Africa bazikebere balabe eddala oba yali mpiso ya covid gye baamukuba wiiki bbiri emabega naye nga bazze basoma amawulire nga bagamba nti yagibwako samples. Era ne mbuuza dokita ne mugamba kati essaawa zino lwe basaba naye nga amawulire gabadde gayita nti yagibwako samples. Lwaki badde basoma amawulire ag'obukuusa ate essaawa zino nga basaba nze nzikirize ensayininge batandika okuggyako Jonah samples. Dokita n'ansaba neerowooze mu mbeera gye neerowoolezaamu eya wiiki bbiri omwana wange waafiiridde.
I think it was on a weekend, on a Saturday, when I was called by Jonathan's family, and they told me, Daniel, Jonathan has died. When they told me Jonathan had died, we went to Luyinda, to his home, and the family was inconsolable. It was tears all over. You know, people had to be held up in order for them to walk. His mother couldn't walk because she had treated him for over 7 months in hospital. But it all came down to nothing. For me, who actually thought that I would put this story out before and that I would be able to impact his life, it was a very big blow on my part, because I thought that at least I would tell this story, but that Jonathan would also get to live to see this story. I think for me the hardest part of this investigation was having to bury Jonah. You know, when you're doing stories, you get really attached to these sources. They become like colleagues, because you keep checking in. How is he doing? How is he doing? The family keeps calling you. How far with the story? Have you talked to some people that are important? Are there people that can help us? Because at the time when the family contacted me, all they wanted was somebody to help them with the bills, because they were drowning in debt. They could not pay the bills at Girudu for Jonah's dialysis, you know, and the treatment for the multiple organ failure. He was on oxygen 24 hours for all these months that he spent in hospital. So for me as a journalist to go and bury my source without first of all getting to the bottom of things was a very difficult moment, because at the end of all this investigation, Jonathan died. I didn't ever think that Jonathan was going to die. You know, it hits you very hard, even as a journalist, as you're doing these stories, and while you're reporting a story, your source passes away. So I asked him, Jonathan, you want to go back to school, obviously. What do you want to be when you grow up? And he said he wanted to be an investigative journalist. A boy that they sent to school came back from school with multiple organ failure. Probably after this story, there will be some people that can act and get some answers to this family. Because at 14, losing a child at 14 is something very difficult for any parent out there. When I spoke to them during this funeral in Luyinda, they still felt undone. So we did this investigation through the course of 7 months, and I think the reason why we've given this title is that even now we don't know what was killing Jonah, but it killed him nevertheless. All we know are the facts of this matter. Jonathan was at school. Jonathan was vaccinated without the consent of his parents against COVID-19. Jonathan got multiple organ failure, and Jonathan died. That's what we know.
Killing Jonah,